This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
This message is brought to you by Maker's Mark. Hi, I'm Michelle Norris, host of the brand new podcast, Your Mama's Kitchen. I'm so excited to partner with Maker's Mark because just like our show, Maker's believes in celebrating the people who have inspired us to pursue our passions. And now, thanks to the Maker's Mark personalized label program, you can create a custom label to celebrate those special loved ones with their own unique Maker's Mark label. And best of all, the label program is free. Go to makersmarkpersonalized.com to order your personalized label today. You must be 21 or older. Labels currently available for 750 milliliter bottles only. Bottle must be purchased separately. Maker's Mark makes their bourbon carefully, so please enjoy it that way. Maker's Mark Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, 45% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2023 Maker's Mark Distillery Incorporated, Loretto, Kentucky.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
New activation and upfront payment for 3-month plan required. Taxes and fees extra. Additional restrictions apply. See mintmobile.com for full terms.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Dan Saladino, and this edition of the food programme is all about exploration. That's because in one sense we'll be travelling with someone as they venture into one of the planet's most extreme environments in search of food. And in another sense, this is also a journey into the human body and the mysteries of a part of all of us, the gut microbiome. Let the adventure begin. Arctic wind on the west coast of Greenland. It's 2 o'clock in the morning and -9 degrees. Inside a small tent, trying to shelter from the storm, is an explorer, and he's alone.
Chucking it of rain and ice and snow, and the weather's hasn't got any better at all. Not quite sure what to do.
This was day 3 of the storm, and ice was forming on the side of Mike Keen's tent and his sleeping bag. By now, he's at risk of frostbite.
I'll message a couple of people, see if I can get a boat somewhere. Everything I've got is wet and cold now.
I've said explorer, but it's more accurate to say Mike Keen is a chef who decided to go on an exploration driven by a food obsession.
So yeah, I've been a cook most of my career, but my real passion is now looking into how humans have adapted different techniques and methods of cooking to survive in really difficult environments.
So Mike, let me get this right. The plan is to kayak 1,500 miles up the west coast of Greenland, surviving on nothing but wild Arctic food. Why?
To see how my whole microbiome and my physiology changes and adapts, hopefully, to this new diet. So I'm going from eating my greens and fruit to one that's pretty much all protein and all fat, which is super fascinating.
We'll be following Mike on his Arctic adventure and finding out what impact surviving on that Inuit diet has on his health. Reviewing the results is Professor Tim Spector, epidemiologist and expert on the gut microbiome, who believes this extreme experiment holds an important message for us all.
You can dramatically change your risk of disease just by changing the quality of your diet. And this is fast. This is a rapid change. And this is something that we really need to do in Western countries, as we are surrounded by a terrible environment of ultra-processed foods for us and our children.
So, important conclusions for us all coming up. I should add that the origins of this programme and Tim Spector's involvement date back to the summer of 2017 and a food expedition we embarked on in Tanzania. Just walking through the woodland savannah Tanzania, East Africa, near the very large, impressive Lake Eyasi. And I'm following some of the world's last remaining hunter-gatherers, the Hadza, a tribe of just over 1,000 people. And we're walking through this very dry woodland savanna, surrounded by large trunked baobab trees and acacia bushes, prickly thorns, dry soil and parched grass. It's coming up to midday and it's incredibly hot and I'm falling behind, so I'm going to need to run now to try and keep up with the Hadza hunters. Tim Spector had a hunch that the last remaining humans surviving on completely wild, unprocessed foods have significantly different gut microbiomes, the collection of trillions of microbes we all host. These microbes we now understand have an enormous impact on our health, and the Hadza, Tim believed, could help us better understand the impact of modern industrialised diets.
To me, this could be a pivotal moment. It's a revolutionary idea that these small group of people could be so crucial to the future health of the whole human race. This is the nutritional equivalent of the missing link. The Hadza average microbiome had 40% more species than we have in the UK. Many rare ones, many have gone extinct in European populations. So this is like you're going to these microbiome superstars in the world, this really rare population, which reflects where we were 40 or 50,000 years ago, in the time before allergies, before obesity, before diabetes or our Western-type problems.
But if there were features of a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that gave health benefits, what were they? And could those benefits somehow be transferred to populations in the industrialised world? The only serious attempt to answer that question had taken place in the 1980s. In Australia, a group of Aboriginal people exchanged their heavily processed diets for wild foods they hunted and foraged. In that study, overseen by Professor Kieran O'Day, the group's symptoms of diabetes were reversed.
They were proud to show me how they would survive out there. They could tell me where to go, and we'd move around, and you'd stay in one place for a while, and then when it got harder to catch game, we'd move on. I thought I'd have to stay for 3 months because nobody had ever done a study like this, and I just assumed it would take that length of time to show major changes. The results were so dramatic that there was just no question about it. And they were feeling so much better themselves, and they were just dying to go back to see their families, to show their families how healthy they were.
It gave us an indication that these changes are possible, but it wasn't clear whether it was the extra amounts you're eating, the lack, not having ultra-processed food that was involved. And I really wanted to look at more populations because one person really, that's just an anecdote. It doesn't really hold up in terms of science.
This spring, Tim came across 2 extremely rare opportunities to study dramatic shifts in ways of eating. One was Mike Keene's Arctic exploration, the other was the Wild Biome Project. They're like lemon drops. Right. You're a big fan?
Yeah, you can't get a flavour that intense. Sorrel's a good second, but just that little hit.
So the formic acid that mimics citric acid.
Live ants were among hundreds of ingredients that made up the wild diets for a group of 26 foragers across the UK. They'd all volunteered to eat nothing but wild food for up to 3 months. One of them was Alex McAllister Lunt.
I had some really difficult days the first week and a half, 2 weeks. It's got easier and I've got a lot more organised. Stores of sweet chestnut flour, acorns, cold leached in lots of changes of water to remove the tannins and then blitz down to make flours.
So that as a source of carbohydrate has been really
protein,
important. Yeah.
Basically I have a lot of little things that I can eat and taste rather than going for the food that's in front of me.
You can hear the full story of the Wild Biome Project on BBC Sound. Just go to the Food Programme archive, where you'll also hear the founder of the project, Mo Wild, forager and author of The Wilderness Cure.
I'm really interested to see what we learn from this study. It is fascinating.
It's 3 months since the experiment finished. Tim Spector has the forager's gut microbiome results. Before we hear those results and find out if there's any relevance to us non-foragers, let's hear more about the Arctic diet explorer Mike Keane embarked on. By pure coincidence, as Mo and the foragers were starting to eat nettles, ants and acorns, Mike was getting ready for 3 months of kayaking in Greenland and an Inuit way of life. Before he set off, I'd arranged to meet Mike in a location famous for being the starting point and place of record of countless expeditions, the Royal Geographical Society in central London. The current director there is Professor Joe Smith.
The Society holds a collection of 2 million maps and artefacts. It is a globally unique collection that started in the early 19th century and can tell a story about any place you put a pin in the map.
Mike was there to read records of Arctic expeditions and also take a look at one particular artefact on display, a seal skin vessel rescued a century ago from the icy waters of the Arctic.
Yeah, so this is Gino Watkins' original Greenlandic kayak. Gino Watkins was an explorer, an English explorer from the 1930s, and he led an expedition in East Greenland around that time, and this is his original kayak, which is of a original Inuit manufacture, and unfortunately he didn't survive the expedition. He drowned.
I defy anyone not to just have a little tweak of emotion at getting close to these kinds of objects from any period of expeditioning.
Yeah, objects that just take us to the limits of human endurance, really.
Absolutely.
In a way, yeah.
10 days after that visit, Mike was in Greenland's southern capital, Nuuk, to begin his 100-day, 2,000-kilometre journey up the west coast, stopping off at fjords, camping on rocky outposts, and occasionally visiting settlements to stock up on ingredients from local hunters and fishermen.
That's my dinner. Seal steak, raw seal liver, prawns, and mattock.
Which is whale blubber and skin. And as Mike travelled every few weeks, I called him to check on his progress.
Hey, Dan.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Absolutely beautiful. I was surrounded by mountains. I had a crazy 10.5-hour paddle yesterday. Started off waking up to a frozen fjord, which was kind of interesting. I thought, oh my God, if it's too thick, I'll be iced in. Pretty much existing on seal, fish. I've had one bit of seaweed, scallops, and prawns, and that's all I've had so far for 2.5 weeks.
Also checking in on Mike was a Greenlandic scientist.
My name is Aviaya Hauptmann. I'm a microbiologist and an assistant professor at Ilisimatusarfik, the University of Greenland, as well as the University of Copenhagen Globe Institute. So I do research in the microbiology of our environment, our foods, and our internal ecosystems in Greenland, the place that I was born and raised. And I'm very interested in a holistic picture of our food systems in Greenland and how they impact us as human beings.
What kind of food is Mike likely to be eating over the 3 months?
If you want to give a general picture of what the Greenlandic diet is, in a broad sense, it's first and foremost, it's animal-based. There's very little plants and vegetables available, no fruits at all. So it is about 95 to 100% animal sourced, mainly from marine mammals. And other than that, today still it's non-industrialized, meaning that the foods that we eat, the foods that we consider indigenous and local, are all wild foods that are harvested and prepared in the environment.
Now, I understand there are more than 300 different species of birds, mammals, fish, including a dried oily fish, the capelin.
So the dried capelin, we call it a mesek in Greenlandic. It's sort of a cornerstone of survival in the Arctic because at a certain point of the year, in the spring, summertime, it comes in very great abundances and you can just haul it up on the shore. And then we put them on the rocks to dry, and then you can store them for the rest of the year so that if you don't have seals in a period, if you don't have luck in hunting for a period, you have these dried capelin to eat. Being sort of bottom of the food chain in the ocean, they're full of nutrients, and we eat including the intestines, so they're also full of microorganisms and full of all the healthy fats that you need.
6 weeks in and making good progress along the coast, MSEC was becoming a daily staple for Mike as the distances between remote settlements increased.
I'm being a postman at the moment. Way before steamships and stuff, they used to have a whole series of kayak networks delivering post up and down to the small settlements. And in Kakortok, this really old guy came up to me and he'd written a little letter to a friend of his in Karnak and said it would mean the world to him if I could deliver this letter by kayak, like they used to do in the old days. And there's another guy in Arsuk who's also given me a letter now as well, which the Greenlandic guys with me were almost in tears looking at this guy giving me this letter. It was really touching. It's really nice.
Now, Mike, seals are an important source of food on the West Coast. What's it like?
Seal, it's very deep red, super nutritious, loads of blubber on it. So the fat is used in many different ways. In the south of Greenland, it's prepared, it's called igenek, which is fermented. So it's left out, a lot of the oil kind of just drains away, and then they pack the chunks into a container and leave it for up to 6 months, and it ferments, and it tastes it's almost got a sweety sour type kind of taste to it, but smells like a really strong blue cheese that's perhaps gone off, which probably isn't selling it. Yeah, so I quite like the old seal. Just as well, really. I'm feeling good. I'm not eating as much, just less than half bulk-wise as I was back in England, due to that. It's super nutrient-dense foods. Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm feeling full of energy as well. I've been doing 7 hours kayaking a day, and that's constant. And yesterday was 50 kilometres, and I'm feeling good.
As part of his experiment, Mike was sending blood and other samples to Tim Spector's lab and also Aviaya's. There, she checked to see if Mike's Inuit diet was starting to change his gut microbiome, especially as he increased his consumption of fermented foods.
Some of these microbes actually have the potential to create short-chain fatty acids such as propionate. And propionate is well known to bring satiety. They make you feel full, and more so than imported foods. And that's something that's very important to discuss in a global context. If the foods that we distribute around the world are not making people feel full, we're going to be eating a lot more than we need to, and we are eating a lot more than we need to. But our foods, as we say, make us full, and that's something that I think will resonate with Mike as well, and there might be a microbial component to that. So we're curious in looking further into this.
8 weeks in, and Mike was more than 1,000 kilometres north, and the weather was starting to change.
It's been bitterly cold, absolutely biting, and a couple of times I've done some long kilometerage as well. I've done a couple of days of pushing 50 Ks.
And when you say cold, Mike, I mean, is it something that we can relate to, or is this is a different level of cold?
It's 0 to -1 in the day, but at night it's dropped down to -9, -10. and there's like ice on the inside of the tent, there's snow on the outside, there's ice on my sleeping bag. So I'm sleeping in 2 layers of trousers, 3 pairs of socks. I've got 3 layers plus a coat and a hat on inside my sleeping bag. And it's incredible that as a chef, I love the food out here. There's so many different types, but food just loses any sexiness at all. It just becomes a pure practical matter of get something hot, quick as you can inside you, and get in the tent and get warm and get dry. There's no mucking about chopping up or doing slow-mo onion chopping or anything like that you see in all these wilderness programs. It's just like I had a cod. My knife was getting a bit blunt, so I almost just mashed it off the bone with the knife, and then just mashed it into the pan just so it cooked quicker. I'm using gas a lot at the moment. I thought there'd be more driftwood, but there's not. Plus, it takes a bit longer to cook up a driftwood fire, and the energy that I have, I'm not feeling worn out at the end of the day. It's kind of weird how nature is providing the right kind of diet to survive in that kind of environment.
And what about plant food, Mike? I'm just wondering in terms of seaweeds or other wild plants.
Nothing at all. I had some seaweed three weeks ago in Kokotok right at the start, and that is it. And I'm not craving. The only craving I've got actually is for chocolate. I really want chocolate sometimes at the end of the day. I just really fancy some horrible chocolate bar. But other cravings, carbs and fruit and veg, not at all. Not that. I've got no interest in that.
It was 12 weeks in and further north when Mike was caught up in that serious storm. And I talked to him soon after.
Morning, Dan.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, 3 days and 3 nights stuck in the tent. Yeah, it's like when you see these pictures of like Everest where people got the tent shaking. It was like that, and the wind. The wind was absolutely crazy. It actually picked the kayak up, blew it into the tent, snapped the pole, just missed my head, and then blew the kayak 15 meters up a hill behind the tent. It was crazy, and it destroyed my tent. And it was a blizzard outside as well, which didn't help. Everything got absolutely soaking wet. Luckily, about 12 hours after that, the wind died down. And another day or so of that, and I would have been in real trouble. Because as soon as you get wet, the sleeping bag was wet. Inside, all my clothes were wet. It was a particularly trying time.
You've a long stretch ahead, Mike, and starting to see fewer people. Are you stocking up on supplies?
So I've caught a couple of cod, which has been brilliant, but most of it has been given to me by locals. And I've got loads of dried seal, dried walrus, dried whale, and dried cod as backup. So I've probably got 4 or 5 days worth of food just in the dried stuff. But I've been eating a lot of seagull eggs. It's coming to the end of the seagull egg season now, and wolffish liver, which is probably one of my favourite ever foods ever. It's unbelievably lovely. It's got a really kind of unctuous, rich, creamy taste to it, and it is one of the best things I've ever tasted. Really, really lovely. And I had it with some crowberries, which is like a kind of a quite heavy on seeds and skin, but it's got a slight sweet taste to it. And you pick them and freeze them in August, September. But the two combined are fantastic. It was the best meal I've had here in Greenland by a long shot.
1 month after that conversation and another 400 kilometres kayaking through blizzards, Mike appeared on Instagram to make an announcement to the thousands of people who were, by now, following his journey.
I've made a big decision over the last few days. I'm going to stop this expedition in Upernavik, which is 2 days paddle, well, probably 3 days paddle north. The sea ice is still thick up north, and to get past it would involve me paddling quite a way out to sea. I'm approaching the 100 days now, which I'd allowed for the expedition. So I'm quite gutted to finish early. But on the other hand, I've done 2,200 kilometres solo paddling up the west coast of Greenland. I've done the whole diet thing. I'm pretty chuffed with how that's all turned out, really. And I'm looking forward to getting home. And donuts and coffee.
On Mike's return, he visited the medical team at King's College London to give samples and be scanned. And as Professor Tim Spector explains, it was as if Mike had returned from Greenland in a different body.
Blood tests were super impressive. He'd really dropped his blood pressure, his blood lipid levels were fantastic, his blood sugar levels had sort of dropped to half. All his parameters, whether it was inflammation, everything, as if it was a different person. It was really impressive. And when we put him in our DEXA scan, which measures body composition, he'd really lost huge amounts of his internal body fat around his organs and liver, which is where most of us store our fat, which is really bad for metabolic diseases. That had just, melted like butter in him. And so a lot of the weight he'd lost had been, in these important areas. So metabolically, he was looking super healthy.
And yet for 3 months, Tim, Mike has been eating a high-fat diet based around seal and whale blubber and pretty much no plants at all.
His diet was not something any doctor would recommend because he wasn't able to get any traditional forms of vitamin C, for example, or other nutrients. So he was getting everything from some fresh fish and a lot of fermented animals. And so it is remarkable that he did so well. And he didn't seem to get any major deficiencies during that time. And okay, we don't know if he was there for 5 years, he might have some problems, but certainly in a few months, he appeared absolutely fine.
Professor Aviaya Hauptmann.
The point here is that there's no single diet, no single food that's good for everybody. And this idea is so dominating today that there must be a universal solution. There is no such thing. There are millions of solutions around in each place, and those are the solutions that we need to find and trust other people to find their solutions.
And what of the Wild Biome participants? Again, says Tim Spector, the impact of their diet was impressive. 80% of the foragers saw the numbers of health-giving microbes increase significantly, and there were other benefits.
There was one individual who was taking medication for diabetes, completely reversed their blood glucose scores just in 2 weeks, which was mirroring what we'd seen and heard about from the study in Australia. The weight of all of them who were overweight, and they lost an average of 16% of their body weight, and some lost 20 kilos. So for these people, it was pretty game-changing. And you think about a 16% drop in your weight, there's very few things that manage that, apart from surgery or these new appetite suppressant drugs.
Mo Wild.
And what it means is that ultimately you can actually move towards having a healthier microbiome, which in turn leads to a healthier immune system and, more resilience and better gut health. So a good thing.
These experiments, argues Tim Spector, show not only how adaptable our bodies can be, especially when we switch to less processed foods, but also how quickly our bodies can change.
And this is something that we really need to do in Western countries. And just by going halfway, reducing that, we can make dramatic improvements in our physical and our mental health.
Tim, it's unlikely people listening are going to be following in the footsteps of Mike Keane or the Wild Biome Foragers. So is the real takeaway here that if we are worried about our relationship with food and our health, change is possible and our bodies, along with our gut microbiomes, can respond very quickly?
Absolutely. This is fast. This is a rapid change. These stories are really empowering because they show us that we can all do our own experiments at home. We can all reduce down to a small fraction of our meals, ultra-processed foods. And we'll know based on these studies that just within a few weeks, you'll start to feel better. And you can do this continuously for the rest of your life without having to cross Greenland.
Professor Tim Spector. More analysis of Mike Keane's and the foragers' results is underway. If you'd like to find out more and do a deep dive into the details, just go to the Food Programme website.